What's important to you? My mission is to ask as many people as possible this question, because I believe once you know what's important, you can design and build a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. My name is James Dean. I'm a life coach, and I hope this podcast inspires you to uncover what's important to you. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at James Dean Coaching, or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also learn how I can help you understand what's important at jamesdeancoaching.com. Today's guest is the founder of The Dog Knows, a coaching and support service which focuses on building a lifelong relationship between people and their dogs. When we can learn to communicate effectively with a sentient being like a dog, then we can be pretty sure we have improved our ability to communicate with each other. The Dog Knows sets out to enhance, encourage, and build better relationships with our canine friends. The key to this is communication, and when we understand the mind of the dog, its motivators, stressors, and communication style, then we are ready to build an amazing bond with them based on trust, kindness, and understanding. The Dog Knows, supporting families to think dog, talk dog. In this episode, we find out what's important to Mary Farrelly. Hi Mary, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this chat. So Mary, the first question is always, what's important to you?
Yeah, this is a great question. I've listened to some of your podcasts as well, and I'm like, it could be anything, couldn't it? This could be absolute, because there's so many important things to us. But I decided that what's important to me are actions and feelings. Okay, so both the actions and feelings of myself, but also of others, because we have such an impact on each other. So actions, as we know, have power and they have potential. And this can show up as good, or it can show up as bad. And it can make us, it can break us, or it can shape us, all of those things. So I think taking action or not taking action for me will mean that I'm either in or out of alignment. And this is all really becoming very clear to me of late. So, and I'm sure it's not just me, I'm sure it's something that we all struggle with at different times in our lives as well, or for all of our lives, because I feel looking back that probably it's something that I've been working on all of my life as well. But I suppose what's important is that we have to be mindful that we always have a choice. We can either take action or we can not take it. And then we have to live with the result of that, I suppose. So whatever we decide will take us in one direction or another. But I think for me, for so long, I was stuck in not taking action for whatever reason. I think maybe lack of confidence, maybe upbringing, maybe, I was sort of, I suppose, geared to this is who you are and this is what you'll set out to be. And I probably believed that for such a long, long time. Or possibly I practiced that because it was what I knew and it was what was familiar to me. So I was always very good at sitting in the background, being very quiet, knowing to keep my mouth shut, and also very good at, I suppose, helping others. That's kind of where I felt I fitted in life. And funnily, it's actually still where I feel I fit in life. I think that's a role that comes very natural to me. The difference is now that I choose to do it, not that I'm made to do it. And I think that's quite important, because for a while I struggled with that. There was nearly a resentment then. But I as I've grown older and I've had many years behind me now at this stage, it became clear to me that actually that does make you feel good inside. To genuinely help somebody makes you feel good inside. But when I started making the decision to take action, then my life started to change. Sometimes at quite a rapid pace, where I kind of felt, oh my gosh, this is a little bit overwhelming, it's a little bit too much. But it's brought me on such an adventure, James. It's brought me, like, it's allowed me to work in so many different areas, in the community sector with people with disabilities. I've worked in the early years sector, and now I work with people and dogs. And that came about from inaction to action. So it came at a point where I had hit the floor and I really didn't know where I was going. So a beautiful person, a guy at a hot desk behind me, sat me down with my tears and a coffee, and he had a little chat, and he said to me, Mary, you need to stop and take a little bit of time to think about what really makes your heart sing. And I'd never heard that phrase. I've heard very similar many times since, but at that point I'd never heard it. And I was like, but I don't know what that is. I don't know what to do next. I'm stuck. This is it. I'm back, to where I started. And so we got talking, and through this little conversation, he spoke about go back to childhood, what made you feel happy, what brought you alive, what really made your heart sing. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of getting somebody to see and to feel and to bring all those things back up. And for me, I laughed at him and I said, well, where I felt happiest was when I was with animals, actually. And I think that was probably a confidence thing as well. Our animals never judge us, they don't expect anything of you other than you just to be who you are in any given moment, which is fantastic. But what I've learned to do since that is to, I suppose, think about it, take that and harness that to support others to do the same thing. So in the role that I do now, I work with children predominantly. I work with all ages, but really, especially in the last few weeks, it's become so clear to me that it is about young people. It's definitely, that's definitely where the passion. I come out and I work with them and I see them grow in front of me. I see, the little realizations on their faces. I see maybe a child who just, when they first come into the room, wouldn't even look up at me. They hold their head down, they look up under hooded eyes. And by the end of 6 or 8 weeks, they're a different person. They've started to see and believe in themselves. And I think that's pretty magical.
Yeah.
So from that point, I feel they, without even knowing it, they're starting to take action in their own lives. Yeah. They're starting to play a part in that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think just for everyone, for clarity in the sense of what you're doing with those children again is it's essentially what you're doing at the moment is helping them. And I want you to tell me, but you're helping them essentially work and train with a puppy. Is that really in a sense of that perspective? Tell me a bit. Tell me a bit more about it.
Yeah, no, and that's interesting that you say that, because sometimes we don't really communicate, our message very clearly. So originally when I started, it was just with children. And the idea was it was setting up a business to work with children and their family dog to help them train the dog and have a bit of fun. Now, those elements are still there. But what I found over a couple of years of doing this, that it was more than that. I was seeing something special happening in front of my eyes with these children and with their dogs. So what I've learned and what became very clear to me is that when we work with like a child with a dog, it's that sense of there is no judgment, there is no expectation. The dog is there in the moment, and it helps the child to be in that moment as well. So I suppose for me, this is really important, because growing up, I was such a shy child that struggled so much with life. So when I see that child come through the door, I get it, I understand it, and I can relate to it. But what it allows the child to do is to have a voice, to start believing in themselves, to start to see that actually, look, I can do this, I can work with my dog, because it's a two-way benefit for both the person and the dog, I believe, James, because the dog gets the benefit of, having a child that is kind to it, that understands its needs, that is patient with it, that wants to have fun with it, compared to maybe a dog that may have come in the door with a child that literally is swinging it around, by the lead and collar, that is shouting at it, that it is rough handling it, you know, maybe overconfident with the dog.
Yeah.
It's teaching a mutual respect, but what it really teaches is really good, clear communication. And what I use the dog for is nearly a conduit for the child. So all pressure is taken off the child. The child never feels under pressure because they're there to support their little dog who needs help and support. And that's the way we work it. And it really is beautiful to see it in action. I think you nearly have to be there to really see the benefits. But equally, you know, the parents, when they come in at the end of each session or at the end of the term, whatever length term that is, they too are, I suppose, they're different by it because they see a different ability in their child. They see their child start to blossom and they see their child start to grow and to shine. But I truly believe that if we work with children at a young age and their dogs, the skills that they're learning there are transferable into their adult life. Plus, I think we're creating a kinder world. They're building empathy. They're building, you know, kindness and compassion. And trust, you know, there's a trust there, and a special bond grows between that child and dog.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm really glad you kind of explained that, in the sense that, because from if you were to look at it, and you know, maybe the way I was looking at it, it's quite sort of almost binary in a sense. Oh, it's dog training. Do you know what I mean? It's very much all, people, I'm a dog owner, as you know, and you want your there's that basic level of making sure the dog does what you want it to do, and then, basic things like toilet training and being able to walk on a lead and stuff. But what you just said there, especially when you said about working with children, and the phrase that you used, that like the dog is a conduit, but the change in the child, and I think the question I asked is that when you set out, were you expecting this sort of that the way it to be?
No,
Yeah,
thank you. I really appreciate how you put that back, because it's been so difficult to get the message out, because
yeah,
I feel it. And I think it's like everything, James, isn't it? When you feel it, you assume that everybody else is automatically
yeah.
feeling it. So no, when I started, I was looking for a business. I was looking for an income, but this has turned into a passion. It's so much. This now is my life purpose, and I can see it very clearly. And it's more about education than it is. It's not about dog training. So I know that you can see that just from having a conversation. But for so long, I struggled with the word dog training. I don't want to train a dog. I want to build a relationship between a human and another sentient being. But in building that relationship, the human and the dog get so much more out of that. They get so much more. So I suppose I always like to say that I'm about the underdog, the underdog, be it the dog or be it the child. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. But it's to be the voice of the underdog, because I recognize in those children a little lost soul, because that's from personal experience. But I can see that the dog is magical in that sense, but it's such a two-way process, because the dog also benefits from it. So I want to, when we're in a class and I'm chatting with the children, and the children are getting frustrated because maybe, they're trying to walk away and the dog, plonks itself on the ground, and they're just frustrated, and it's like, the dog won't do it. The dog won't listen to me. And we have conversations about, why do you think that is? What do you think the dog is thinking? Or what do you think the dog is feeling? So we're talking about real emotions, and these aren't just the emotions of the dog. I can reverse that. I can say, have you felt like that? Have you ever experienced what it feels like to be afraid, or to be scared, to be not sure where you're going? Because this is what the dog is feeling. And that helps the child understand feelings and emotions, both for themselves, but towards another living, feeling, sentient being. And I think that's really important. I think that's a really valuable piece piece of learning for them. And like I said, if we learn these things naturally as a child, you know, we get our head around feelings and emotions and how our actions, it's back to the actions, you know, the actions of that child can have an impact on that dog. Now, obviously, I'm not going to use big fancy terms with a child, but we bring it to the level that they're at, you know, to their level of maturity. And we can have, you want to hear some of the conversations they have. So we talk about dog body language, and I've just recently trained I'm now certified to support children who are afraid of dogs as well. So a fear of dogs is a big thing for children.
Yeah.
Remember, fear is also transferable. It may not just be fear of a dog. So if we can give them skills and techniques there, or overconfident children with dogs. Some children are overconfident, where actually they're equally at risk because they're not picking up on the signs from the dog. You know, we learn about non-verbal communication because dogs are always communicating with us. We're just not always listening. We're not seeing their communication, but they never stop, and they're communicating and reading our communication constantly. In fact, they probably know us better than we know ourselves. Like when you just get up to walk towards the keys or to the drawer where the lead is, they're on it. They already they're always 4 paws ahead of us, I believe. So that's what it's about, empowering that child, but also empowering the dog, because the dog will have a better quality of life from that.
It's literally sort of tingling, because it's like from hearing it from the perspective you're providing it, because we had a childhood dog. I think when I was 15, my younger sister, she would have been about 11, and she was the one desperate for the dog when we were kids. And when I'm reflecting back now, I can now see exactly what you're saying. My younger sister was always quite confident, but you can see how much more she got from that relationship with the family dog. I got the 2 dogs that we have. I've got them when a lot older and an adult, but it's it's you don't quite know what to expect, even though you really want to get the dog, and you kind of have whatever vision in mind of what it would be, but you do get that the connection is something completely almost hopeful but unexpected. Do you know what I mean? So the way that now that you say that, it's like I can really see it in the way that you're but the dog and the child together, and how they impact each other. But as you say, that potential growth in that child at such a young age, and the potential acceleration of them as a human, and as you say, those things that they're holding back on, whether it be fears, doubts, low confidence, can be released, because you say the dog isn't judging them. It allows them to come out, and it's a really interesting thing to see. What you're saying is that how the parents then can see the difference in the child as they progress through working with yourself.
There's a little story I'd just like to share, if it's okay. Again, when you speak about parents, this was a couple of years ago, not long after I had started, and I think this little boy was 7 years of age, and I think he created a lot of this thought process for me, this one particular child, because his mum had contacted me. This little boy had autism. He was 7, and he loved his little dog, and his mother had contacted me to say, I work with children in groups, in small groups, and their family dogs, okay? But she said he would not be able to come to a group, Mary, but I see so many benefits to him. He says, and she says, I'd like him to experience the same as other children experience the opportunities. And she was very emotional. And I says, gosh, she wanted me to work one-to-one with him in his home. I said, I've never done that, but I said, I'd be more than happy to try. I said, but we will be sort of playing it by ear, because obviously things weren't going to be the same as it would be in a group setting. So we went along, and it was a 10-week program I did with him. And each week we went and we worked on one thing. So we just say, for example, we're teaching the dog. We work through like a little agility setting with them. So each week we add something onto it. So at the end they complete a circuit. And even in that, look at the sense of achievement for a child, and a sense of pride and joy, and from everyone's perspective. But this little boy worked each week. He was fantastic. Now his concentration normally a session will be an hour, so we get maybe 30 minutes, and then he had enough, but that was fine. And it was a little Bichon, a little white cuddly Bichon. And this dog just loved this little boy. The little boy could be a little bit rough with him as well, but the dog took it in its stride. But we talked about that. We showed him other ways. We showed him other options of how to get the dog to come. Because a lot of children, if they get frustrated, will force the dog into a situation rather than understanding how to bring it on. And so will adults. It's not just a child thing. Adults will do the same thing.
Yep.
We have a power over our dogs. But I don't want children to have a power over the dogs. I want them to have a relationship, an even relationship. So each week we built on a little agility thing, and we've worked up. And at the end of the 10 weeks, his mother would just leave the room. She'd go out to the sitting room and leave us we'd done it in the kitchen. And at the end of the 10 weeks, he was coming to the end, and we'd worked on his little routine. We were building up a little routine. And she said, I said, he has to do his little assessment, okay? So I use different words with the children, but it's an option that they can go for a certificate and a badge if they want to. And over the terms, the more they come, they can work up to different levels. It gets a little bit more difficult for them and the dog. So we were all set for his assessment, and I asked him, do you want to help your dog get its badge and its certificate? That's kind of the way we go at it. Would you like your dog? Do you think it's ready? That's the thing I'm asking about the dog. I'm really asking the child from its perspective. So he was quite excited, nervous, excited, but he says that he'd like to do it with his dog. So the following week was the assessment, and we went into the back garden and whatever. But they brought all the family and friends, right?
Right.
So here was this little boy on this little lawn with this ring of family and friends around the outside. And I was a little bit intimidated, never mind the boy, because I was like, oh my gosh, all these people. So he worked through his assessment, and everything went perfect. Now, another time the dog would run off, get a bit distracted, but we called him back. And this is what we teach the children. It doesn't matter if it goes off track, you can bring it back on track. So there's so many life lessons here. But at the end of it all, anyway, they had succeeded, and they'd earned their little badge and their certificate. And we got like a little podium, and, he came and he stood up on it. And that child's face glowed. It was like the sun glowing back at us. The sense of pride, and he had his little dog up in his arms, and he got on the podium and he's looking round, and they're all clapping and encouraging him. And he says, oh, Mary, my little cousin's there. So his little cousin was there. He was around the same age. And he said, can he come up with me? Can we get the certificate and the thing together? So, he brought up his little cousin, and he had his little arm around his cousin and the other little arm around his little dog, and they got their things. But it was everything else. It was his mother and his father. And, his mother was so emotional that for her boy, he had achieved something on par with his peers, which that was priceless to her, and that sense of pride and joy. But for that little boy, he too had achieved something that he hadn't been sure about before. So there's so many, but he really inspired me, James, because I could see the transformation in that child. And that's what it's all about, really.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really powerful story, that one, because it really encapsulates now what you're doing, and I suppose the word that I think there is the impact it can have, because it kind of, again, it's making me think now very much so, in a sense of going back to what you said earlier, in a sense of that wanting, the desire to help people, and to help people sort of, whether to be develop or grow, and so much when we go down below a layer of how we do that. So from your perspective, it's working with children and dogs. From my perspective, it's having conversations, or maybe working with people in different ways. It's still getting into, that sort of deeper stuff to help that person or help that child, but it's what I was hearing there, though, as well, is that almost ripple effect. So like how, because I'm sure it's like, I don't have any children, and don't have any experience of, any children with autism in that regard. And I'm sure the challenges it faces. But I'm sure how, not just in the sense of the mother feeling that her child is then, the same as every other child, but just, you say, the impact on his general behavior and who he is as a child and then as a person, and how it impacts them and their whole family and everyone else. So it's amazing how you think, oh, oh no, I'm just working with a child and a dog. No, no, it's so much more, and how it spreads out across everything. I
That's
think
it.
it's quite impactful.
Yeah, when I worked in the early years sector, and I was studying a particular curriculum. So in early years, you have Montessori and whatever. So
Mm,
I trained under a curriculum called High Scope. And High Scope is all about kind of experiential learning and all of those things. But I remember when I was doing my studies, this is a good few years back,
mm,
I came across the term, and you know it, we all know it, but the term was reaching your full potential, reaching their full potential. And that always stuck with me, not just from the child's perspective, but it made me question myself. Am I
yeah,
reaching my full potential? So well, everything that life is so amazing, isn't it? Because
yeah,
everything that presents itself to us, whether it's good or bad, has, like I said, a potential for something.
yeah,
And it can be something amazing, but that sent me also on a quest to reach my full potential in whatever that may be for me. And I think that's a lifelong journey. I don't think it's something you actually hit and you say, oh, I've done it, yay.
yeah,
I don't think we do that. I think, to me, life is about reaching your full potential. It's aiming towards that, working towards it. But everything that I've done from that point has been about supporting others to reach that potential, because it's there, it's in all of us. And it's like, the way I see it is, for some people, it's just buried so deep inside, wanting to shine, wanting to break out. But for that person, unless they take that action, be it only a little step, maybe it could be to ask somebody, how do I go about doing this? How do
mm,
I start? Whatever it is for them, then that light will stay dim. And I want to help people shine that light.
mm,
That is a purpose for me. That is a life
yeah,
purpose. But I think we all have a life purpose. But our actions, coming back to the beginning of
yeah,
it, our actions can actually have an effect on somebody else's life purpose
yeah,
as well. So it's important that we're mindful of that all the time. Everything we think and do and say also impacts, we're all connected. So it also impacts on somebody or something. And that could be impacting on a dog. So, the actions
mm,
of people with their dogs, not necessarily just children, because I see it with adults as well. Adults coming to me frustrated, because the dog is disobeying, and look at all the negativity that's behind those words. So my job is to help them understand the dog better, to get into the mind of the dog.
mm,
And actually, we can learn a lot from being in that place. We can learn
yeah,
a lot. But when they understand what motivates the dog, what the big mistake we make is we put human feelings and emotions onto our dogs, which is
mm,
very unfair. That it just doesn't work that way. And we say he or she is doing it on purpose. And dogs don't generalize in that way. They don't set
no,
out with intent. Dogs are out to survive.
yeah,
They're on that they just want to survive. So they do whatever it is that they think they need to do to survive, which to us can look like a bad behavior. But
yeah,
when you understand the thinking behind it, the logic of the dog, then that
yeah,
changes. And people will often say that in class. They're like, oh my gosh, Mary, it's like they may not go out the door with a perfectly trained dog, because that is
no,
never my mission. And actually that won't happen. You don't come in for a few weeks and walk out the door with a perfectly trained
yeah,
dog. That doesn't happen. But what they do go out with is a different knowledge and a different way of thinking about things. But equally for the adult, that change in thinking will benefit them in their life in
yeah,
general.
yeah. No, and that's what I can. That's where I can completely relate, in the sense of, and I think it's kind of put. picking up on that and kind of what you said earlier, I think in relation to the children you said, but it's the thing with dogs, and you find it is with my own dogs, is how they're able to mirror and reflect.
Mhm.
And so that thing again of like the times when you're maybe, if you're frustrated, annoyed at something, and you then whatever pass that frustration out onto the dog will just give frustration and anger, and so you think, oh, then as the to use the human phrase, or you think that the dog is acting out, or being bold or naughty or whatever. It's like, no, it's just responding to the energy that you're giving it at that moment. So it's either it's responding to how you are behaving as the human in that scenario. And that, it's so again, when it's the thing of like, I don't want to use the word necessarily training, but it's really that the development in the person to then help to bring the best out of the dog.
Yeah, and in doing that, they bring out the best in
Best
themselves.
in, correct.
And
Exactly. That
yeah,
full reflection. Yeah.
yeah, full reflection. And you kind of hit it on the head there where you're on about, it's called anthropomorphism, where we kind of put our feelings
Yeah.
onto the dog. So a good example of that is when we come home and we find, the dog has maybe wrecked something, rooted through the bin, and it's all over the floor. And you walk in and the dog is cowering in the corner, or the ears are back, or it's turned away from you, all of those things. And they're all appeasement signals, by the way. They're all saying, please don't be mad at me. And it's not saying, please don't be mad at me because I've wrecked the bin, because the dog has gone through the bin because it's like, oh, is there food in here? Oh, is
Yeah.
there something worthy in here? Is there a gain in this bin for me? It's not
Yeah.
gone through the bin just to make your life miserable or my life miserable. But we come in and straight away, we stand differently. We are giving out a negative energy. We are, our facial expression is cross. We're angry. And the dog has probably experienced that somewhere before. And it's like, oh, this is not good. This is not how I want my human to be around me. So,
Yeah.
they give off all these signals, which are just appeasement signals. They're not guilt. They're not,
Yeah.
they look very guilty, and like, even me saying that, I see it when I come in as well, but that's not what it's about. So if we understand where the dog is coming from,
Yeah.
actually it takes so much of the frustration away from us,
Yeah.
because we're dealing with, I always say, we speak English and dogs speak dog. We don't speak the same language. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where my phrase is, like, working with people to help them think dog, to talk dog. If we can understand the mind of the dog thinking, then we can communicate with them effectively, and we
Yeah.
receive their communication back.
Yeah, because I think that before I go on, I'm just thinking, as you're talking, I keep just thinking about my two Labradors, and what I find quite interesting as well is like, so one is 5, and the other one will be coming up 3, and so we've got a black lab and a golden lab, and the black lab, it's like she literally do anything for food. Her drive, her whole drive is about food. Now she love to play and things like that, whereas in the golden lab, her drive is toy and play. Like she'll be just as happy to eat. But if you have a ball, like it's just so it's so interesting that the same breeds, they're not from obviously the same sort of family or anything like that, but they're the same breeds, one's golden, one's black. But the difference in sense of what their focus is or what really drives them is completely different. And I think that's the other thing as well. Sometimes they go, I think, oh, a dog's a dog's a dog. It's like, no, it's that individual. The dog has a different. We always think about a different personality, but the way I think it is. Am I right? I think it's a different drive. Would that be right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. But I think personality leaves it a word that most people will understand, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, again, each of our dog, as in the humans, is formed from where they came from their beginning, from their upbringing, from their start in life. But we're back to all that nature nurture kind of thing, the influences there. And it's like that. Even what you said there is a great example of, if you can see that, you can see one dog is motivated by food, one is motivated by toy. there's the essence of working with your dog. This is what I used to work with this dog, and this is what I used to work with this. Instead of saying, oh, it won't play with the toy, or oh, it won't do anything for a piece of food. Well, most labs will do anything for a piece of food.
That's very true.
It's the natural one. But yeah, it's like they are different. We can't expect them. They're not clones. And I think this is often a big mistake that people make with dogs. And you see it so much at the minute, don't you? It's dogs are such a big thing in the human world at the moment. But it is a little bit sad where it's gone with dogs, because they're nearly a fashion statement and a fashion accessory at this stage. So people see this beautiful picture of this very cute little furry bundle of puppyhood, and they see it sitting static in this picture, and somewhere in the back of the mind they've made that association that I'll bring it home and it's just going to sit and look cute like that. And that's not reality. We're talking about a sentient being with feelings and emotions, and like you said, a drive and a will to do whatever it needs to do, you know, and it needs to learn and explore and be motivated and all of those.
No, it's brilliant, fascinating. But again, and this is what and I was so looking forward to sharing. What I love about this conversation is the part of this is just the dog itself, but as you going back to what you do and the impact, in a sense of not just a sense of what dogs have on our lives and what the positive impact they have on our lives, but how you have been put yourself into a position how you can make that even better for that, for the child or the family, so they can have. And I think you used, am I right in said you used the word earlier, was like to create that relationship, that it's not the sort of master and dog and stuff like that. It's like, that creating that connection and that relationship with that human and that essentially that sentient being, that other animal. That's why I think that's really a really powerful thing. And that's because that's what I've got with my dogs. And so I think that's a really what you're trying to do and to help people. I can see how really important it is, given the example of the story that you gave us earlier as well.
Yeah, it's the exchange, isn't it? There's an exchange there, and it's like I absolutely adore dogs, but I don't see dogs as people. A dog is a dog in its own right, and I think it's disrespectful to think of a dog as a person. But it's not. It's a different species, and we can't take away the dog. We're trying to do that all the time. We expect the dog to fit into a human world. Why can we not just see it where it's at and embrace it and enjoy it? And that's powerful. But the lessons and the relationships and all of those things we've spoken about today, to me, if we can instill those in the younger generation, then that is changing the society we live in. It has the potential to change the society that we live in. And my hope is that those children that come through the doors and experience those kind of relationships will go on to be better human beings, basically.
Absolutely. Love it. I always ask, I like to ask this question of people come on the show, are there any quotes or phrases that are important to you that you use as part of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, look, I've got a really bad memory.
Right? Yeah, that's okay.
Try and pull up something, doesn't work. But what I did do, I was thinking about this from listening to, because I listened to your other podcasts, and some of the people I mentioned there, you're sitting there and you're going, yeah. There's so many amazing people out there. But I think there's two things I'd like to share there. One, I wrote down the name of this lady. And first of all, do you know who she is? Catherine Switzer is her name. Do you know who that is?
No, I'm not familiar.
But you probably will, or you'll investigate, because I think it will interest you. So Catherine Switzer was the first female to run officially in the Boston Marathon.
Okay, no, she is now, I didn't remember the name,
So I remember, a good few years ago, seeing a piece on her, and I investigated and watched a little bit of a clip or something that was telling a bit of a story of her life. I watched actually the clip of the race, and if you haven't seen that, watch it, because it is very emotionally charged. But she really, really jumped out at me because she spoke about, I have a link I'm going to share with you, and you can pop it up on your podcast as well. But it's her real story where she's narrating it, she's speaking in it. But it's like she's just an ordinary human being, the same as all of us, and she just went out to take part in a race. She had trained with a couple of men, and her boyfriend was there as well. He ran in it too. So her and these two men just signed her up and took her in, and she put her lippy on, and they're kind of like, don't do that. Now, this is only 1967. Like, it's a while ago, but it's not that far back. Really. So when she took off in the race, so she's narrating it from, she said, I want to share what really happened on that day. So it wasn't all as romanticized or intentful as people said it out to be. She just went out to run a marathon, on a personal level, really. But it became so much more than that, such a changing point. But there's a part in it where I've just written it down here because I wouldn't remember it, where she just says, this is just a little bit out of it. And she's like, I couldn't help it. I felt so ashamed. I was crying. Again, Tom had convinced me I was just a girl, a jogger, and a no talent like me, and now had bumbled the Olympic dream out of his life. So this is her boyfriend. So he started off with great intent, but as it went through and he got into trouble, he pushed the official over. So as he's jogging on, he's like, oh gosh, there's going to be a reaction to that. And then, the joy from that moment for her was gone, because he actually turned against her and ran off and left her there, pulled off all his markings and everything, and sort of deserted her, because he became very he started to himself, what did it mean for him? But for her, it was like, in those split seconds, it's like all of these things kind of hit you. And it sounded to me from reading it that she was quite a confident person. For the first time in her life, she started feeling these feelings during this race, and feeling this contempt and this anger and all of those things. So I thought her story was quite inspiring, actually. So I'll share that link with you. It's a nice little read as well. But I can relate to those feelings. I've been made feel like that so many times in my younger life. Well, throughout life, but especially in my younger life. And what a detrimental effect it can have on us. So that's that. But who really inspire me in life? Ordinary people, James. Ordinary people. Again, in my career working in community, until recently, I ran a number of women's sheds here in Meath. And we had ordinary people coming through that door who had me in tears, who had me on a high, who pulled heartstrings, who showed such strength and such integrity with things that they had faced in their life. And they're the people that inspire me. So everyone I meet inspires me. Because we all have me.
Oh no, they're two fabulous. And I'd say, like, it's terrible for me to have not remembered her name, because in a sense of like the runner that I am, I'll get some slagging for that, I'm sure. But no, and it's interesting because I've never looked into it, both into the details. So I'll be interested to look at that myself. And I think it's interesting, as you say that, in a sense of, as you say, it's not that long ago, in the sense of the late 60s or when that happened. And then if you think about it, just last night, in a sense that the Irish football team, qualifying for the first time for the World Cup, and sort of how, but even in that, how things change. And I think it's kind of that sort of echoes in a sense of like the whole part of what you said in the beginning of this podcast of actions, and that actions can, have further actions, and that sort of sliding doors effect, and one action can lead to the other action, but how things can take that time. You think, oh, that's so long ago, but no, it's only, whatever, 50 odd, 60 years, how it's taken for that to get to this point, in a sense of, if we think of it particular, that example of women's sport, in a sense of, for like the women last night to get through to that World Cup. But if you think, not tangent here, but those women 5 years ago essentially had to go out on protest, just to get tracksuits from the Football Association here in Ireland. So it's that powerful thing of how those actions can have then the impact it has. and a really powerful story there. But the second point you said there about the, well, you know, quote unquote ordinary people, and it's a really, I think that's even more powerful, because when I talk to people, whether it be through the podcast or whether just generally chatting or through coaching, and you people start to open up, and I'll ask them this question or something. Just, oh, I'll ask people, oh, tell me something that you've done, something you've achieved, something you know, and everyone goes, oh, sure, I've never done anything. And everyone puts themselves down, and then they'll tell me within the, you know, with the next 20 minutes, oh, that they can, you know, they're grade 8 at the piano or something, or that they can sing, or they can, you know, they can knit or make their own clothes, or I played for Ireland at this level of the sport, or I represented in this. And you're like, that is, you know, we're so quick to put down in our own, sometimes our own achievements. And it's in those, as you say, those quote unquote ordinary people where you can hear the richness of stuff.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit it on the head, James. It's like we all do things, and because we're doing it, we assume that it comes natural to everybody, and it's everybody definitely has a gift inside them. And I think that's really important, that we're there to encourage everybody every step of the way. And nothing gives me more satisfaction than to share a space with someone where that opportunity becomes available. But we all need to share our gifts. It's actually selfish to keep them to ourselves. And that is about action. And I love what you made the comparison between the girls and the match yesterday, because it's only, even in the last 3 years, and I'm not a very sporty person, but it's not about the sport, is it? It's about what that means. It's about the importance of it. And in the last couple of years, it's only now in this last, I'd say the last 8, 9, 10 months, when I see women on telly in sport at those levels, that we're starting to believe there's is the same, that it's equal. It still isn't equal.
Yeah.
But there's now, we look at women on the sport and there's a respect for them, which wasn't there, I'd say, even 8 or 9 months ago. I see a big change in the last while.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's absolutely, I think there's different sports are in different stages and they're catching up. But I think you think of, in particular, again, just the example of the football, and a sense of, like, because obviously so male dominated, but male dominated as well because that's where the money went into as well, and the investment you can see. But it's, you think of there was the female European Championships just in the summer gone, and the how that has had an impact in a sense of obviously England being successful there, then the elevation of professional women's football in Europe, seeing seeing it on the news as a part of the standard news bulletin now. It's part of the sports bulletin on the radio. It's no longer an and finally. Mm-hmm. It's becoming more part of it. When I'm listening to like radio shows like Off the Ball, it's part of the normal discussion, so it's still, there's still so much more that can be done, but it's part of it. And it's interesting in sense, depending on sports, because just again to off on a tangent, which is I love this in sense of one of the sports that I involve myself into, and I very much a fan of, is triathlon, and in particular Ironman, which is long distance triathlon. And it was the World Championships just in the weekend just gone as well. And you could say arguably part of it is a PR to get lots of people to do it, but they split the championships down the days. They have Women's Day and have a Men's Day. Now before they wouldn't even given enough slots as the same number of professional women as professional men, and it's now gone to there's a full day for the women to race and a full day for the men's to race. And when I watch both of the races on the different days, but it's like when I'm watching the women's race, I'm just watching the women's race. They literally are the best people in the sport that I participate in. And then I'm watching the men's and watching the best. Then it's the same course, it's the same, there's no sort of quarter given or anything like that. And it's, so you can start to see the impact that has on then the next generation. So bringing it back in a sense to some of the points that, how does this all relate to, you working with children and dogs? But they can see it.
Yeah.
And and as you say, in a sense of the point that you made earlier, I think, in sense of just to be able to make them to be good, positive human beings, and what they're able to then take from that and go forward, I think is a wonderful thing to bring it back to.
Absolutely, because it's action, isn't it? And
Yeah,
I always base it. I always use the phrase, when I'm talking about the children's classes, it's about helping, working with children to teach kindness, respect, and understanding, because those things will carry us through life. And like we said at the beginning there, every action does create change, and it may take many years or it may take seconds. But everybody, even the smallest action, is part of that change. And I think that's important to remember. So you may think you're only, maybe, I don't know, or you could be just sending a letter or a memo, but that could be a pivotal part in the change. So, every part is crucial. So,
absolutely. Mary, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I just have one more question, which is, what's important for your future?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to stay in the same vein, isn't it? I think it's to keep doing, to actually, what's important is to believe in self, and to use that to create change, to take action and create change. So, to keep finding ways to support and to help people, and sometimes that will be with dogs and sometimes it won't, and that's okay, because we always have more than one string to our bow, I think. But it's just to believe in yourself and to believe in others, and then I don't think we can go too far wrong.
Absolutely. As I say, it's been brilliant to chat to you, Mary. I will make sure, obviously, where people can find you, connect with you, is shared in the notes. But if you want to give a shout out now, where people connect with you online.
Yeah, I think the website is thedogknows.ie, and then I'm on social media, so it's the Dog Knows Why on Instagram. So the Dog Knows Why is very important. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the social media platforms. So you'll find me at The Dog Knows, and you can email me at mary@thedogknows.ie.
Fantastic. And as I said, all of those will be in the show notes as well. So you'll be able to click on those. So finally, thank you so much again, Mary. I really appreciate it, and love chatting to you today.
Pleasure, James. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and share. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Again, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram. Connect with me on LinkedIn, or find out more about me on jamesdeancoaching.com.